Hi, everybody. Here we are again. Do you have your cocktail or whatever it is you're drinking, your cup of tea or cocoa? It's kind of warm for cocoa, but I'm having myself a nice, fresh splash of good whiskey here. Do you realize that we've been doing this for 15 weeks? It's true. This is story number 15, and we've been doing them once a week. Actually, probably 14 weeks because on the because I did one on a Saturday night with Carrie and then the following Sunday. So I suppose this is 14 weeks. The first story was March 22nd. That was a long time ago. It feels like a lifetime ago. If you haven't seen the other stories, you can, they're all posted here on this group page. So at your leisure, maybe in daylight, you can go back and watch and listen to some of the other stories from when we first got started, right? In the early days of this pandemic. So we've been doing this a lot, and I was visiting with Rachel and listing all the stories that I've done, and then trying to think of, am I going to run out of stories to tell? And we started jotting down more stories, and I have another whole page of possibilities. So I'm not done yet, and neither is this virus. So even though things are opening up a little bit and we can be outside and we can see one another again, oh my gosh, it's so good to see people again. I even read that there's a safe way to hug where you turn your faces away from each other and you can hug people. Oh my goodness. I've missed hugging people. I hug everybody. And don't worry, I won't hug everybody now, but boy, oh boy, some of you just got a hug. So tonight, I'm going to talk about something a little bit different, but not really. In many of my stories are stories about me encountering ghosts or spirits or something, where I end up in a place where they are, and that's not all that there is. I've had many experiences with people who've passed, who've died, and I say to folks when they lose someone, the first we're here, then we're everywhere, and those aren't just words. Those are truth. That's truth. Because what I've learned in all these years of having my eyes opened and of paying attention to things beyond what's just right here, solid. We are everywhere. And our loved ones are never too far away. Now, that doesn't mean that your ancestors are hovering around you and watching your every move and all your most intimate moments. I don't believe that's the case. What have learned is that when we think of our loved ones, I've heard so many people tell me this, that they'll be thinking of their dad, and all of a sudden, they can smell his cologne. When I have encountered ghosts shortly after they have died, a few have told me that when people think of them, it's like they're drawn to those people who are thinking of them. And I remember the story of the young man and the footprints in the snow. He said that. He said that it was very disconcerting because he wasn't sure that he was dead yet. But every time somebody thought of him, he was like, whoosh, there. And I explained to him he didn't have to actually go from place to place, that without a body, you could be any place. Am I right? It's our physical selves that constrain us. I've heard people tell me that they'll be thinking about somebody and hear their voice, and whether it's whether that loved one is there and that's why you're thinking of them, or vice versa, that doesn't really matter, I don't think. But I have known and I have experienced personally that when I think about, and when we think about those who have passed, it's almost like conjuring them if we allow it. Now, I know things can be explained. I'm thinking about my loved one and a dragonfly comes and lands on my hand. And it's like, oh, hello. And we could be just reading more into just a dragonfly landing on our hand or not. We can choose to decide if what we're experiencing is our loved one or if what we're experiencing is just making sense of things around us and reading into things more than what is there. There's one night up north last year, after we had lost my mother. Well, we didn't lose her. We knew right where she was. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. But we were all out on the screen porch up north and laughing and talking. My mother, for years and years, she would sleep in the bed. The screen porch has 3 queen-size beds and then a couple of twins down at the end and then a big, huge table and a sitting area and a party area. And the bed closest to the table is called the party bed, and that was Granny's bed. And she would get cold at night when we would sit outside and on the porch and we would laugh and tell stories and talk. And so she would climb into her bed and get under the electric blanket and lean up on her elbow and while we would talk, and she would laugh with us. And one of our family traits is when somebody says something funny, you go around the circle and it's like everybody repeats the punchline and we all laugh again. And then somebody else repeats the punchline and we all laugh again. It's just a family trait of the Shippers family. And so this night they were laughing about my one nephew they were saying, you need to go on a dating site. He wanted to meet somebody and he said, oh, I tried that. I went to the Christian Farmers site. And we all laughed. And he said, and I didn't have any luck or something like that. It wasn't Christian Farmers. It was something like that. And we all laughed. And of course, it was repeated. And then the laughter dies down. And we're all at the table. My one sister's sleeping way on the far end of the porch. And we hear the voice of my mother. She had this cackly voice. And we hear, Christian Farmers. She repeated it. And we all heard it. And somebody got up and went down to see if Colleen was awake, to see if she was the one who had said it. And nope, she was sound asleep. And so we all said, well, Granny thought that was funny too. So this is something that, you can ignore that stuff or you can pay attention to it and know that our loved ones are near us. I have had some experiences. Is this bouncy? I feel like this is bouncing all over the place. It's not very stable tonight. There, is that better? I hope so. Not so. Don't get nauseous until morning. So I've had experiences where ghosts see me and recognize me or maybe not recognize me, but just come and ask me for help, ghosts themselves. I've had people ask for help, to connect with their loved ones, and I can't always do that, Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I can't imagine ever, I don't know, but I have had experiences where the ghosts themselves come to me and ask me to tell something to their loved one in my presence. And the first time this happened in a big way, I had it happen where I kind of ignored it, and it is really weird to just say to strangers, hey, your dead loved one wants me to tell you. I don't do that. I'm not like those TV mediums that just go and talk to strangers and freak them out all over here and there. Of course, they have their big camera crew with them, but I don't do that. That's just not, I don't think it's okay. I don't think it's okay to just, I think it could upset people a lot, but sometimes I have experienced really, really persistent ghosts. And the first time that this happened was at Bell's Brewery in Kalamazoo. I was at Bell's. Rachel and Dominic were living in Bath, and Rachel had a show at Bell's. Virgil was a baby, and he stayed home with Dominic, or else Rachel was, I don't know when it was, but anyway, it was just Rachel and me, and I was in Bath, and I drove with her to Bell's, and she was doing her show, and I was sitting up at the bar, and Amy was behind the bar, and she was, I can't drink beer, so Amy gave me like a glass of wine or something, and I was sitting on the bar stool, and my back was to the bar, facing the stage, and watching Rachel play. I love to watch her perform. I imagine some of you do too. But I was watching the show, and a woman came and just sat up next to me, and I smiled at her, and I didn't want to engage in a conversation because I wanted to watch Rachel. And oftentimes when people know I'm Rachel's mom, during her shows, they want to come and talk to me, and I want to watch the show. So if you're ever with me at one of Rachel's shows, smile at me and we'll talk at the break. Anyway, so this woman comes and pulls up the chair next to me and sits there, and she says, "You're Rachel's mom, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And then I politely, turned it to watch the stage. And she didn't interrupt. She didn't do anything else and just sat there. And then Rachel finished the first set and was going to come down off the stage, and people were coming up to the bar to get more drinks. And this woman turned to engage me again, and I saw this young man in his probably 30s, early to mid 30s would be my guess. Now, a lot of people are walking up to the bar to order drinks, and this guy is walking up, and there are two women walking really close behind him, one on each side of his shoulder, and I could see them on either side of him, and these two women are staring daggers at me. They're not watching where they're going, and he's walking right toward me, and they are looking at me like, just right up at me, and not blinking, nothing. And this guy walks right up nearly in front of me, and he's in front of the woman next to me. And it turns out this woman is his partner. And she introduces us, and she said, "This is Rachel Davis's mom." And these two women are still looking at me. Now, by this time, I have figured out that they're not really there. Well, they're really there, but they're not physically there, because all I can see is their faces behind his shoulders. There are no bodies behind him. They're just like, as if they're almost attached to his shoulders, one on the left, one on the right. These two women, that one was a little bit taller and had curly-ish dark hair, and the other one wasn't quite as tall, a little thinner. But he's standing there, and she says, "This is Rachel Davis's mother." And his comment was, "She's really lucky to have her mother." And I look at these two women over his shoulder, and now when someone is talking to you, you're supposed to make eye contact, and it's really rude to look past people, beyond them. But these women are doing their utmost to get my attention. And this one starts doing this thing, and I said, "You lost your mother." And he looked at me kind of shocked, and he said, yeah, I did. And I did what I always do, and I said, "Our mothers are never too far from us." And he says, right, I know, she's in my heart." And I said, "Well, actually, no." And she is like, this woman she was on his right, and she is like frantically trying to get me to say that she's there. And this is a total stranger, and this is in Bell's, and it's loud, and it's a show, and there's people all around, but she was not letting me not say it. And I said, "Well, actually, your mother is right here." And now this woman sitting next to me that is his partner looks at me kind of shocked and looks back at him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, right. So what does she look like?" And I see the woman on the side with the curly dark hair, And I said, she's got blue eyes. She's got eyes like yours. Her eyes look like yours. And she's got like darker hair. And he said, wrong. My mother did not have eyes like mine. And I said, oh. And then the other one points to herself. And she's got brown eyes. And then I knew, I mean, they tell me, they don't like say it in words, but then I knew that the other one, that these two women were both his mother. And what they revealed to me was that the one with the blue eyes was his birth mother. And I said, oh, right. The mother who raised you had dark hair and dark eyes because your mother died when you were a little boy, and she's your mother's sister. And his knees kind of buckled, and he stepped back, and he was like, and now this woman next to me is turned, and she grabs him by the arm, and she's like, oh my gosh, and the guy, his eyes are like welling up with tears, and he backs up a little bit. He says, whoa, 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 this is too much. I said, I'm sorry, I won't say anything else. Now, meanwhile, Rachel walks up to come next to me, and she says, oh, I see you met my mom. And this guy is still kind of reeling. And the woman said, yeah, we met your mom. And he said, how did you know that stuff? And Rachel says, oh, I should probably tell you my mom's a medium. Now, no one has ever called me a medium. This was the first time. And I was like, no. I'm not a medium. What's a medium? Whatever. And then the woman says, what else? Are they both here? And I said, yes, they're both here. I said, do you want me? I don't have to say anything else. Do you want me to go on? And the women are like, yes, you need to go on. Yes, you need to go on. But I wasn't gonna, if this was upsetting him, I didn't want to freak this dude out. You know what I mean? He came to Bell's to listen to Rachel and drink really good beer. And all of a sudden, his dead mothers are talking to me and want me to tell him stuff. And he's like, no, that's okay. What else? And so what I told him is that you never lost your mother. She's been with you your entire life. And I said, remember when you would lay down to go to sleep just before going to sleep, and you could feel like her hand on the side of your face? She was there. And his eyes just grew wide, and his lip is trembling, and his big tears in his eyes. And I said, your mother says that she was in her sister's ear your whole life, and that she helped raise you too. And he's like, oh, this is just too much. I said, okay, I'll stop. And he's like, I just need to take a break. I need to take a break. And I said, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. And he walks away to go get some fresh air. Meanwhile, his partner says to me, you have no idea how important this is for him to hear this now. He has been struggling so much. He's been struggling with this recurring theme of abandonment. And he doesn't even trust me that I'm going to be here. This is his partner. And he doesn't think anything will stay. And I said, well, clearly things do stay. And, yeah, things sometimes never go away. And he comes back. And he said, okay. All right, do they have anything else they want to tell me? And I'm waiting. And they're with him. They left with him, by the way. When he walked away, it's like they were stuck to him. It was like they were getting their energy from him. And, they didn't stay there when he walked off to get fresh air. They went with him, and they were comforting him. And they were like this group mama hug around this guy this entire time. And he said, okay, what else? And they said, don't be afraid. everything will be okay. It's okay for you to have a child. And I'm like, I have no idea what that means. And the woman goes, I told you. And she tells me, we have been wanting to adopt a child, and he's afraid to adopt a child. And then both of the women say to me, in unison, they're communicating to me, tell him he will never get cancer. Now, this is not something you say to a stranger. I mean, how do what if, I didn't know what to do, and I was hesitant, and they kept repeating it. It was like echoing in my brain. And I said, I have to tell you something they're saying. They're saying, you will not get cancer. And he just, like, hands in his face, and the woman next to him kind of grabbed him, and he just said, I gotta go. And he went back outside with these women. And I'm like, I am so sorry. I mean, you guys come out here, you paid a cover charge. And she said, no. She said, both his moms died of cancer. And 2 days ago, he told me that his genes are not good for getting cancer. And he does not want to have a child because he does not want to die and abandon that child the way he felt. He was abandoned. And you telling him that, I said, I didn't tell him that. This isn't for me. I take no credit for this. This was his mother's that told him this. And she said, this is huge. Thank you so much. And she gave me this big hug. And then she left and went out with him. And I didn't see him again, and I didn't see his mother's the rest of the night. And it was it was very upsetting to me because I had upset him. And I suppose I did have a choice. I could have just kept my mouth shut, but I didn't feel like I could. I didn't feel like I should. And so I shared their message. And when we were driving home, I was really second guessing myself, and I was thinking, oh my God, I cannot believe I said that stuff to that guy. I feel like crap doing that. And what if I was just like making it up in my head as I went? And Rachel says, Mom, how would you know all that stuff? How would you know those details about him? You've never met him before. You know nothing about his life. And you had all those details. How could you just make that up? And I was like, yeah, maybe I didn't. And so I told myself, I guess I won't take responsibility for what I said, but I will take responsibility for saying what his mother's said. And so that sort of opened up a whole new can of worms for me. That sometimes spirits have things they want us to know. And sometimes they try to tell us. We dream it sometimes. You know what I'm saying to you? Are you dreaming ever of your loved ones? You have questions about things. You could ask them. You could ask for advice. It was like, oh, I wish my mom was here so I could ask her about this. You can. And even if it's just that you know what she'd say, sometimes she'll tell you. And sometimes it'll be in a dream, and sometimes it'll be in that place between asleep and awake. If we listen, if we pay attention. Because our mothers especially never go too far from us. But others don't as well. Another time, was a few years ago, and I think it was a school show or conferences or something. Anyway, I was late at school, and this was when Bunce was teaching night school, and I was leaving Pine River, leaving Leroy, and going to be heading up to Cadillac, and I called him and said, hey, how do you still have a bunch of students there? When can you get out? I'm about halfway out. You want to meet at Maggie's? And he said, yes, I'll close up here. I'll meet you at Maggie's. Well, we hadn't seen each other, with me working days and him working nights, and I would go to bed super early because I'd have to get up super early. So we'd go all week without really seeing each other, which is probably why we've been able to stay married for almost 40 years. No, also because we kind of really like each other and have a lot in common. And he knows I'm always right, which I'm not. Anyway, so we met at Maggie's, and Maggie's is a little local pub at the end of our street. And we've been going there since our kids were little. When we moved here, it's been there for 30 years, and it's got the same wait staff. And we used to walk down, once in a while and take the kids down and have supper down at Maggie's. And they would have a bowl of popcorn on the table, which is great when you have little kids because, when you go there, they're smelling the food and they're really hungry. And we would go and we bring toys. And I'm totally digressing from the story, but Maggie's is a family tradition. And so we met at Maggie's, and it was a little after 8. Excuse me. And nobody was in the place. Well, there was only one other person in the whole restaurant. It's one of those, it's not a late night kind of place. So we went in, or I went in, and Bunce came in afterwards, and there was one woman in a booth, and she was in the booth by herself, and we went and sat in the booth right adjacent to hers. And we did that because it makes it easier for the servers, instead of being across the restaurant, it's easier for, because we know them and we care about them and want to make their job easier. And so we went in the booth right by this woman, this single woman by herself, an older woman. And she looked familiar, but in Cadillac, a lot of people look familiar between Gopherwood concerts where I MC, and there's always people at the concerts, and city council and all the other things I'm involved in the city. I know a lot of people, and I recognize a lot more people than I know and can name, but I recognized her. And so I sat on the bench facing her and Bunce had his back to her. And she just looked up at me and smiled, and I smiled back. And that night, our server was Elise. It wasn't Pat, who is usually our server at Maggie's. And Elise is German and has a German accent. And she comes over and she clears away. She drops off menus and takes our drink order. And she goes to the woman at the booth adjacent to us and picks up her dinner dishes. She had finished dinner, and asks her if she could get her anything else. And the woman orders another glass of wine. And she took our drink orders, and I got a glass of wine. And we're sitting there, and every time I looked up at her, she was just looking at us. And I sensed a sadness about her. I sensed a sense of loss. And, here's Bunce and I, these old people together, having a meal together, and she's all by herself. And I knew there was a reason for that. And so I just smiled at her, and when the drinks came, hers came at the same time, and so I picked up my wine glass and raised it to her, and she did the same, and sat there. And then we looked down at the menu, and I was looking at the menu trying to decide between the two things I can eat on the menu, which one I wanted. And when I looked down, when I looked down, I could still see across, you look down and you could still see the room. I mean, look down for a second. Can you still see the room beyond? So I could still see the room beyond. And what I noticed was, as I looked down, there was a young woman sitting next to her. And she was probably in her early 40s, late 30s, probably early 40s. And she was sitting next to her, and while I was looking at the menu, I didn't look back up, and I watched her lay her head down on this woman's shoulder. And then I looked up because I thought, did somebody come out of the bathroom or something? And when I looked back up, she was there alone. And I was like, oh, okay. all right, I get it. And the woman is still looking at me. But as I looked back down, the younger woman laid her head on her shoulder, and she reached up and she just put her hand on her shoulder like this, and then put it back on the table, and I knew she felt it. And we placed our order, and then she gets up out of the booth and walks over to our table. And as she does, or wait, before she does that, I kind of put my eyes down, and Bunce is talking to me, and I'm trying to listen to what he's saying, but I'm also really, really transfixed by what's happening in the booth behind him. And I just quietly said to him, Buncey, there's something going on. So you could just keep talking, but there's something going on in the booth behind. And he knows me, and he's like, oh, okay. All right. And so I was looking at him, and as I was looking at him, I could see the booth behind. And now there are 3 people on that bench in the booth. And it's the woman who is physically there, and then this young woman who is not physically there, and next to her is an older gentleman. And it was like, oh, that's her family. That's her family. And I looked right at her, and I smiled at her, and then I looked to my side, to the side where the other 2 were, the woman and the man, and I knew it was her daughter and her husband. And looked back at her, and she got up out of the bench, and these other 2 stayed there just smiling at me, just big grins, smiling at me like, yeah, this is awesome. And she walks over to our table, and she said, excuse me, I don't want to bother you. She said, I'm really sorry. I don't ever do this. She said, I never order a second glass of wine, but I've been coming here to get used to eating by myself, eating out by myself. She said, I'm sorry to disturb you, but I recognize you. I've seen you at Gopherwood, and I know who you are. And I just want to tell you that I have no idea why I'm talking to you, but I ordered a second glass of wine, and I have never done that. Something told me to stay, and so I'm here. And then I just felt like I needed to come and talk to you. And I said, I'm so glad you did. You want to join us and, scoot over to have a... She says, no, I don't want to come sit with you. She said, I'm not sure what I want. She said, I've had a really rough year. And I said, I'm so sorry. What happened? And she said, well, my daughter died this year. And I look, and now here's a woman telling me that her daughter died. And I'm supposed to keep eye contact and be with her, but this woman in the booth is like drawing my attention like crazy. And I glance over at her, and when I look back at the woman talking to me, all of a sudden the young woman is right with her. So I didn't have to keep looking away. But the gentleman is still in the booth. So now I've got 2 ghosts and this woman talking to me. And she said that her daughter had been sick for a really long time, and she finally just couldn't hang on anymore, and she passed away several months ago. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I can't imagine anything worse. That's just horrible. And I reached out to take her hands, and she didn't reach for my hands. I just kind of reached my hands out, and she said, but then 2 months ago, my husband died. And so now I'm all alone. And now these 2 are right with her, and she just told me she's all alone. And my big mouth, I piped up and said, well, not really. You're really not alone. And she said, I know, this is such a great community. I love being in Cadillac, and I said, no, actually, your daughter and your husband are here. And she said, I knew it. And I'm thinking she's gonna, call the funny farm for me. She said, I knew it. She said, my husband, after he died, she said, I could feel him in the house. I knew he's there. I could feel him all the time. I'm in the car, I turn on the radio, and it's always on his station. It's never on the station I want to listen to. She said, I knew it. I knew it. Is he here right now? And I said, yes, he is. And your daughter is here too. And she said, oh my goodness. She said, I knew it. I knew it. She said, that's why I stayed. And then the daughter wants me to tell her something. And so I said, can I say something that your daughter wants me to tell you? And she said, please tell me what she wants to tell me. I said, and the daughter is conveying this information to me. Remember, they don't tell me like I'm telling you this story. It's like it's communicated to me, and I speak like for them, or I don't know how it works, but I said, you recently traveled pretty far, and there was a big event, maybe a wedding or a christening or something. It was in a church, and somebody lit a candle and acknowledged your daughter who passed away. And she wants me to tell you how much she appreciates that, and that she was indeed there and was there at that event. And she's like, I knew she was. I could tell. I just knew she was there. Oh, thank you so much. She said, I went to my daughter's wedding, and it was shortly after her sister had passed away. And so we said that we wished she could be there, and that we would think about her, and they lit a special candle for her, and I said, well, she was there. She didn't miss that. She was there with you. And then the gentleman came up, and he didn't really tell me anything to tell her, but the two of them put their arms around her, and she's standing there, and she was there all by herself. And it was like, if I was standing there and Rachel was on one side and Bunce was on the other, and we were talking to somebody and we put our arms around each other, that's what it was. That's what was happening. They were both right there. And they both told me this, and I told her this. I said, they're telling me that you have taken care of them your whole life. And they want you to know that now they're going to be able to look out for you and take care of you. And that they're going to be there whenever you need them. And sometimes even when you don't know it, like tonight. And she said, oh, thank you so much. And then Elise comes with our dinners, and she says, okay, I thank you so much. She said, thank you. And she said, you enjoy your dinner, and I'll see you around. I'm sure I'll see you around. And then she left most of her wine on the table, and she took her check up to the bar, and she left as our dinners came. And Bunce this entire time was completely speechless. He was just sitting there, big eyes, just watching this interaction. Bless his heart, because this, he just, that's probably why we've been married almost 40 years. So then Elise, the server, says, when my husband died, and she starts telling me about seeing her husband all around her house, how she would put things away in a new place. She rearranged the kitchen, and she'd find the things that he had always put someplace else back where he liked to put them. And she's saying, he's always around. I could tell, like when I come home after working here, and I come home and the light goes on in the house so that I don't have to go into a dark house. That's him. He's there. And this is in a little family pub in Cadillac. And everybody in the place is just openly talking about how our loved ones don't really leave us. Yeah, I think it's a real thing. So I've had other instances of this, and one, can you hear there's fireworks going on outside? It's only a week till the 4th of July, so we should probably be blowing off bombs for 2-3 weeks before and after. Anyway, I think people are blowing off steam. Hopefully it's by themselves. Anyway, so probably the most difficult time for me that this sort of thing happened was when my cousin's young son, he was 13 years old, and he passed away. He'd been suffering from brain cancer for a long time, and he finally just, it finally just took him. And my cousins, they used to live in LA, in California, and when I graduated from high school, I had gotten sick when I was 13. I think I told you this in another story, and I needed to have surgeries, and I didn't expect to live very long. Doctors told me at 15 that I probably wouldn't live past my 30s. The diagnosis was wrong, thank goodness, because I'm well past my 30s. Hallelujah, I'm still here. But when I graduated from high school, I bought a train ticket on, it was when Amtrak was a new thing, and you could buy what was called an Amerirail pass. They used to have Eurail pass, where you could buy a ticket that lasted over a length of time, and you could ride as many trains as you wanted. And so I cashed in my life insurance policy that matured when I was 18. I was not 18, I was 17 at the time. And I cashed in my life insurance policy and bought a Amerirail pass, and actually rode the trains and for like almost 3 months. And I went and visited family in various places, and I went and stayed with these cousins in LA for like a couple weeks. I think I was with them, and they were just, I loved them so much, and I feel like they saved my life at that time. I was really lost. I wasn't sure I wanted to come home after that trip. I wasn't sure. I didn't want to find a river to walk into or something, because what I was facing was going to be not something I was looking forward to. A progression of an illness that was going to eventually take my life, so they told me. But when I stayed with them, there was such a joie de vivre, you know. It was just this, I loved being there. My cousin Lori, this is the one who lived at the death house, and all those kids, just, I felt like they saved my life. I just really did. I felt like they made a huge difference in my life. And so when my cousin, who was one of the young children then, when her son died, I knew I needed to go for the funeral. And now she's living on the Cape, in Cape Cod, and her husband's a Cape Cod fisherman. And there was really no way I could get there. It would mean I would have to fly out to Boston, get some kind of transportation out to the tip of the Cape, and then get back to Boston, and then fly back to Michigan, and then get back home from there. And I couldn't afford a ticket, and I couldn't afford like a place to stay, and it was really not realistic at all to even think about going. But I was compelled to go. And I just put in a note somewhere, I think there was family correspondence or something, and said, I feel that I need to be there. And my one cousin piped up and said, I got you tea. And he bought me a plane ticket. And then another cousin said, I've got you, I've got a room for you. And they paid for my hotel room and got my hotel room there. And yet another person said, we'll make sure that you get a ride from the airport. And so all these people just congealed to help me go. And I arrived, it was already dark. And when I arrived to the town, everyone was at the funeral home for the visitation. And I brought my oils. Because when you go into a funeral home, sometimes it's not just the people that you're going there to see that are there. And I steadied myself because the grief of losing a child is overwhelming, and I feel it. And I knew I was going to be feeling this. And so I prepared myself, I breathed, and I walked in, and there was all my relatives. The place was packed, and all of the Cape Cod fishermen. This is a group of people that they've experienced the loss of fishermen at sea, and it is this tight support net that is something I have never seen before or since. These people are there for each other and have been for hundreds of years. This is a generational thing. And so I walked in and all by myself, and I'm like looking around, and I look over and I first see my cousin, and she's standing with her mother and talking, and the grief was like, even though people were talking and there was some, it wasn't just sobbing and stuff, but people are having conversations, and there are children there running around. And I looked over and I saw this boy's father standing there, and standing right next to him is his son. And he's just standing there looking shipwrecked himself. And all this other stuff is going on around him, and he's just in this daze, just standing there, lost. And this boy is just leaning on him. And when I walked in, he turned and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and he knew I could see him. And I knew he knew I could see him, and I knew. And he disappeared. And so I said, don't be afraid. I'm here if you need me. And then I went and I hugged everybody and was just there and in the place. And then that night in my room, I could just feel him. He was like in and out and in and out. And he wasn't frantic. He was like, just like he had something to do. He was, I have to say that I have experienced many people at their funerals, and most are a little bit confused and trying to figure things out, and others are just, this kid was so prepared. He was an old soul. Even though he was here for a short time, it was clear that he knew what was going on. He was well prepared. So then the next day at the church, I was just kind of sitting towards the back by myself with everybody else around, and I could see him with his parents and his sister, and I could see him up above in like the rafters of this beautiful ancient church, and I could see him off sitting with his classmates, and I could see him by his uncle and by his cousins, and I could just see him everywhere in that place. This kid had figured out that you don't have to be first one place and then another. This kid had already figured out that you could be everywhere, and he was. It was, I've never, ever seen a spirit that adept right after their passing. right after their transition. It was powerful. It was a great lesson to me. Um, so then we went to the cemetery, and the cemetery was this 1600s Cape Cod cemetery that you had to walk up this hill, and it was the top of a hill with this rocky side down to the ocean. And it was the ocean. I mean, it was, and as I walked there, I sort of hung back. You had to park down a ways and walk, and I could hang back because I'm a slow walker by nature. And so it wasn't obvious that I was hanging back. So I did. And as I walked back, oops, I dropped the cap in my glass. As I walked back behind others, just slowly to my left and to my right was so many spirits greeting this small procession, this not so small, this procession to the graveside. It was like this was something they remembered, this was something they recognized, and they all came out. And I don't know if it was the spirits of the dead in that cemetery, or if it was the spirits of those who mourned in that place. They're recognizing that human emotion that is something we all share if we're lucky. If we're lucky, we all get to experience that deep grief. And it was dozens and dozens of souls just falling in. And then there was the graveside service, and he was buried in the ground, and the grief eater was there. And then everybody just turned around and walked back down the hill in silence, in tears and grief. And it was powerful. And he wasn't there. Watching that, he wasn't there. And I thought, maybe he's just gone, So then we went to this place where the fishermen and their wives had prepared a meal for everybody, and there was a bar, and people were talking and drinking, and it wasn't, I don't know what you call it, it's not really a party. In New Orleans, in my ancestors' culture, it's called cutting the body loose. You sing the mournful songs, and then afterwards you celebrate life and you celebrate the living. And but this wasn't like that, because this was a child, and it wasn't like it wasn't really joyful, but there was a lot of conversation and talking about stuff, and I was sitting by myself on a bar stool. I had talked to a bunch of my cousins and stuff, but then my cousin, the mom, came and sat next to me, and she said, "Tia, I can't believe you came." And I said, "Well, it wasn't, I needed to be here, but I didn't get here on my own. A lot of people helped me get here." She said, "I'm so glad you're here." And all of a sudden, right next to her is her son. And she said, "It means so much for me to be with you. I can't believe he's gone." And once again, in TI fashion, I said, "Kate, he's not gone." And she said, "I know, I feel him, but he is gone." And I said, "Yes, he is gone. He's not here, but he's really here." And I said, "He's actually right here." And she looked at me, and her friend, one of her fishermen wives' good friend, was with her. And she said, "Really?" And I said, "He's right here." And she said, "He's right here. I don't see him." And I said, "You're not going to see him. Can you feel him?" And she's like, I don't know. I don't know if he's here. And I said, and then he told me something to tell her. And what he told me was, he said, tell her to keep saying my name at bedtime. And then I said what he said to me. He said, who loves Dad? I love Dad. And he said his name. Brad loves Dad. Who does Dad love? Dad loves Brad. Who loves Mama? Brad loves Mama. Who does Mama love? Mama loves Brad. Who loves Camille? Brad loves Camille, his sister. Who does Camille love? Camille loves Brad. He said, don't stop saying my name. And I told her that, and she just burst into tears. Now the woman with her was like, okay, that's enough, and says, that, stop it, just stop it. And and she said, no. She said, no, don't stop it. And she said, no, don't stop it. And she said, T.I., that's been our bedtime ritual since he was a toddler. How did you know that? And I said, I didn't know that. He told me that. And she's like, oh my God, he really is here. He really is here. And she said, more. What, does he have anything else? Is there anything else? And he's standing there and he's just sort of smiling. And so I'm waiting, I didn't look at him and say, do you have anything else? I'm like waiting for him to say something. And I said, his iPod. And she said, his iPod? I said, yes, you got him an iPod when he got sick. And he's made playlists. And there's a new playlist on his iPod, and that one's for you. And he said, anytime you need him, you want to know he's there, just start the playlist, put it on shuffle random, and whatever song comes up is going to be your answer. And she's like, oh my God, I can't wait to get home and find the playlist, So I said, does he, I didn't ask if he had an iPod because I knew he did. And she said, I'm going to find his iPod as soon as I get home. So I knew he had an iPod. And then it sort of, other people came in to talk, and she was like, thank you so much. And I said, you're welcome. I'm glad I could be here. I'm just really glad I could be here. So then after that waned, everybody went back to their house. Well, not everybody. All the fishermen went. And I think their wives went home because it seemed like it was just the guys sitting around their big kitchen table with a bottle of whiskey, just drinking whiskey. And I had brought my dulcimer, and I just started playing and singing sad songs as these tough Cape Cod fishermen wept and asked me to repeat songs like 2 or 3 times. They wanted to hear them again. Meanwhile, my cousin went and found his iPod, and I finished playing, and now it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I have to leave early to get back to an airport, and I'm like, I think I'm done. And some have got their heads down on the table, and the bottle is almost empty, and so Kate gets the iPod and turns it on, and I cannot tell you what that song was, but every person in the room went, whoa, that's Brad. So sometimes it takes 3 cousins and airplanes but you end up where you're supposed to be if you pay attention. If you pay attention. Our loved ones are not very far. You don't need me to tell you what they want to tell you. There's a playlist somewhere. Just randomly put music on and you'll know. I've told many people that in that place, between asleep and awake, when you lie in your bed just so still, picture that one you love. Picture the one that you miss. And ask them. Ask them what you want to know. Or if you just want comfort, just say, come in my dreams, I miss you. And more often than not, they will. First we're here, then we're everywhere. It's true. You can even ask me. It's 11 o'clock. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. Next week, I think I may do another story from Florida, from my childhood home in Chicago. I have so many of those. And I was talking with Rachel and saying I shouldn't tell those stories because they're in my book and I want people to buy my book. And she said, people are still going to buy your book if you tell the stories. Just don't tell part 2 where the ghosts tell their own story. And I'm like, oh, maybe I can tell some more stories from there. So I think I will. I have, after these 15 stories, I have half a page more that I can still do. So if you're still interested, I'll keep doing this. Take care of each other. Take care of yourself. Be good to each other. Be good to each other. You know, it's so easy to get angry at people who aren't thinking like us or doing what we wish they would to keep us all safe. What we need is more love, you know what I'm saying? We need more love. Even though I've been clicking that angry face on Facebook a lot lately. Love one another, right? We're only here for a short time. And then we're everywhere. Peace out, my friends. Cheers.